Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and thanks for watching. Well, this is the time of year when on college campuses students are doing tours, not necessarily for this year, but for next year. Are they prepared to go to college? And then our popular healthcare update, all of that and more following these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Let me just say, I pointed this out last week, but I want to again thank our viewers all across the state, in particular our viewers on WGAL-TV, where we're the #1 show at 11 o'clock on Sundays. We want to thank you for that. We're very competitive with the national news and commentary programs in the morning. It's all about you, not about us. We just try to bring you some information, good information, particularly about what's going on in Harrisburg. And boy, we have a great show today. You know, we talk about college all the time and whether you're prepared, but not just about college. You graduate from high school, what do? You want to go to technical school, you want to go to, some vocation, you want to get into the trades. This is all important, and I couldn't it's extremely important, and I couldn't have two better guests to discuss that than Joan Benso. She's the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Partnership for Children, one of the real experts on education in the state, and my friend Peter Garland. He's the executive vice chancellor of the state system of higher ed. Spent most of his life in education as well, studying it, writing about it, just doing it all. Joan, I want to start with you. Look, as I said, do we pay enough attention to sort of the generic preparation once you get out of school? Are kids prepared to move on? Is this a little or a big problem in your opinion?
It's actually a very big problem. I think we make an assumption as parents. I'm the parent of an 11th grader. I'm looking at colleges right now, and I believe that my child is ready for college or ready to go into a job training program or ready to go to technical school. And I think parents all over the state of Pennsylvania believe that. If their kid is passing their courses and is on track to a high school diploma and there's no big red flag that they're not going to graduate from high school in a year, we assume the case. But what the data tells us is we have a very serious problem in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania Partnerships has been looking at information on how well students are doing on common achievement tests in the state, the state's PSSA exam. And how does that line up with how many kids graduate from high school? So what we've discovered is that 461 school districts, all but 38 school districts in the state that award high school diplomas, graduate at least 20% more students than are proficient on the 11th grade statewide assessment. So that says to us, well, maybe that assessment's not so good, or maybe our kids aren't as ready as we think. Well, when we look at the assessment versus how kids do on the SAT, it's very well aligned. And it does imply to us we have a problem. Yeah,
I want to come back in a minute and sort of ask you to spell out for our viewers. We hear about all these tests. And let's try to make that clear. But Peter, look. You worked for the state board early in your life. I mean, you spent most of your adult life, focusing and studying educational policy issues. One of the things that struck me as a college professor for most of my life is that if folks go on after high school, and I don't care whether they're going to a trade school or a vocational school or to one of your colleges in the state system or wherever, there's a lot of extra remediation that has to go on that we're paying additionally for.
That's right.
Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. We find that about 22% of our incoming students, and we have about 18,000 new students coming into the system each year, need remediation in one or more courses. And that's devastating to a lot of students who, like Joan, I have an 11th grader looking and think everything's going along fine, doing well on all the preliminary testing and such, but a belief that they're ready for college, they get there, and they find as they take placement tests so that we're certain they're going to be able to succeed in courses that depend on reading, writing skills, math skills, that they're really up to par with that one. It's a rude awakening for an awful lot of students who did well in high school.
And by the way, it's I used to, when I was in a classroom and this subject would come up, and I'd say, well, we can pay, $100,000 for a nuclear physicist to teach nuclear physics or, do remediation. It's not a very good idea. I know you're doing it, right? But it's not
Well, what happens is that it's not that a student isn't ready for college across all the dimensions of what they need to do. It's that they have certain weaknesses in terms of math and reading and writing skills that I think as we get smarter about how we test students, how we construct curricula to make certain that they achieve, we can begin to say to those students who are somewhere slipping off that track in 9th grade, in 10th grade, in 11th grade, get them back on track so they've got all the skills they need to be able to succeed in college.
All right, we're going to run to I will come back to Joan in a minute. We're going to run to a quick break, and then I want to ask Joan to go through these tests. We've got to, someone has to make this understandable to us. We'll be back with this and more in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Pennsylvania Medical Society. Doctors and patients, preserve the relationship. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Oh, hi, welcome back to the program. Look, we're talking about what I think is one of those important subjects, for young folks. Are they prepared once they get out of school to enter the workforce, to enter college or whatever? Joan, let's talk. Look, there's a welter of tests. Can you make this sensible for people? Go ahead.
This is very easy. First of all, just one little background piece. Peter mentioned that, over 20% of kids who go to the state's, colleges need remediation. But it's important for people to understand that kids need these foundation skills if they're going to community college, where we're remediating 50% of the kids, or if they're going into a trade program.
Or just to work, just to go into the workforce.
They need core math, reading, writing skills. So what's happening right now in Pennsylvania is we have a regulation that says to graduate from high school, you either have to pass what your school district says you need to pass, a series of local assessments or local tests, or the state's big 11th grade test. What the State Board of Education has recommended, and we wholeheartedly support, is that students in Pennsylvania would take a series of common final examinations. So if a freshman in high school in Pennsylvania, very typical curriculum, is taking Algebra 1, for example, and most high school freshmen will take Algebra 1. At the end of that year, instead of taking another test, a big standardized state test, they would take the same final examination in Steelton High School as they would take in Slippery Rock. And it would be the Algebra 1 test. If the student doesn't pass the Algebra 1 test, the regulation that's pending requires that they be remediated.
Is this practical? Is this a practical thing to do?
I think it's very practical. I mean, other states with some modification have used this. I myself am a graduate of New York State High School, took New York State Regents exams, and exactly, it gives you that right at the end of that course, you take that test. Did you master that material? If you did not master it, then you came back the next fall to sort of find out what were those pieces and get those handled so that you then are on track to succeed in geometry, which is the typical next course in that area. I would say beyond practical, it is simply the fair and right thing to do to students and to parents so they know clearly the level of achievement of their students and where they're going to be able to go anywhere in their lives.
And the state, Terry, that's done this most like the Pennsylvania proposal is Virginia. They used to have about 50% of their kids proficient on their state exams, passing their state exams, very similar to Pennsylvania. They now have 90%. They haven't seen their high school dropout rate go up. They have seen kids take harder courses. They see their college remediation rates going down. It works. But the idea is assess a child on a smaller body of knowledge, closer to when they're taught the information, and then step in and help them if they can't get it done.
You know, one of the criticisms of the test now is, well, the teachers say, well, we're just, actually, I don't know if they'll say it, admit it, but we're teaching to take the test. We're teaching to the test. And not, is that in danger? Is that something you think that could happen here?
I think, first of all, I think if you have well-designed tests, well-designed curricula, they are basically testing what it is you taught the students. It's not about practicing by rote in the final days to somehow make certain that you pass the test. Good instruction is built upon a very good sense of curriculum and the assessments that are used to measure whether or not students have learned that. So a well-designed test is not something we have to worry about that teachers would then teach to the test. It would simply tell us that they, in fact, master the curriculum, did they master the content that we wanted them to master.
And another important part of the proposal is that the State Board of Education had the insight to realize that every school district doesn't have the tools or the ability to get all this in line so their kids will do well. So along with required remediation for students who don't score appropriately on this test is a model curriculum for school districts. So if they are too small or don't have the resources to develop a curriculum aligned with the Pennsylvania academic standards, they get one. In addition, school districts will get technical assistance.
Before I let you go, where does all this stand?
The State Board of Education has approved the regulatory body. It will be published in the Pennsylvania Bulletin as proposed regulations in April.
So you think, is this a done deal, Peter? Is the legislature going to get, you know how the legislature can always get involved if it wants, and I put you on the spot here.
In previous positions, I've been through this process before, and I think it should be that way. When you're dealing with core education issues that affect hundreds of thousands of students and their families, there should be a good, lively debate on that proposal. There clearly is going to be a debate on this.
And there's still legislators on the state board, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So they've been, and they're mostly the leaders in the education.
Right. They're the education committee chairman.
All right, great update. All right, when we come back, we're going to turn our attention to health care. There's some important activities in the state legislature. You want to stay with us on that, for that and more after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Joining me, as often is the case, is Carolyn Scanlan. She's the president and CEO of the Hospital and Health System Association. Carolyn, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Terry.
As always, Carolyn's one of our healthcare experts. We get her in here from time to time, pull her away from her business to help us out. Carolyn, look, one of the huge issues, and it's gotten a good bit of publicity in this state, has to do with this business of the state providing some assistance to doctors to cover their medical liability coverage. Everybody goes, oh, okay, gee. Why is this a big deal, and why should our viewers care about this?
Well, because we want to make sure we have enough physicians in the state. And so part of the way you make sure of that is you make Pennsylvania physician-friendly, and you help them with what has become an inordinate high payment for medical liability insurance. And there's two pieces to it. It gets very complicated. The physician buys it in the private marketplace or self-insures himself or herself. And then the state has a layer where it helps out in something that's called the M-Care Fund.
Right. Since
2003, and as part of Governor Rendell's promise when he was running for his first election, physicians, specialists, get 100% abatement of the payment for that state program, and all other physicians get 50%. And so each year, that's passed the legislature, and we were set for a renewal in 2008, with the Senate passing a bill in December in 2007. It was at that point that the governor said that he wanted to link that M-Care payment to his proposal for the program for covering the uninsured.
Yeah, now let me just make sure that we're all clear about this. So the theory is that the state has to provide a little assistance to doctors to cover their medical liability insurance, because if that doesn't take place, then we're going to continue to lose doctors to other states. Is that basically the
That's
the point?
It. And we can talk about what the numbers look like for physicians.
Well, I mean, I want to do this. I mean, the stuff that I've been getting from a variety of sources says we have we have a problem now, but it could be pretty severe with certain specialists like OBGYNs and orthopods. Are they in there?
They are, and neurosurgeons.
I mean, these are pretty important folks, I think, in all of our lives for obvious reasons, and we need them when we need them, right? Well, so
exactly so. we have a national problem
Right.
with a shortage of physicians when we look at 10 and 15 years. But we have an even larger problem here in Pennsylvania because the environment hasn't been, as I said, physician-friendly.
Yeah.
So 1 in every 5 physicians that are currently practicing say they're going to retire in the next 5 years. 1 in every 4 physicians is over 60. And only 1 in every 5 physicians is under 40. So we're going to lose physicians through retirement or age
Right.
faster than we can replace them. And that applies...
So that's going to make this, that's just going to add to the problem, but continue.
Because we want to be able to attract physicians into the state, either individuals who go to medical school here, who either start in Pennsylvania or come from other states, and we have a lot of people who come from other states. We want to keep them in the state.
Okay, so just to bring this to some conclusion, so there's this fund created to help doctors pay for their medical liability coverage. The governor wants to take the surplus that's been accumulated in that to cover the 800,000 or so folks without any coverage. Now, is that a good idea, a bad idea, or can you do both? Can you still get the coverage that the doctors need? I know you're not a doctor. You're involved with a hospital,
but the hospitals
of
employ
course they
half
do.
the doctors
Half the
in the
doctors
state.
in the state. I know, but go ahead.
Well, it's a good idea to develop a program for the uninsured.
Okay.
We really believe that. We're not supportive of the method in which the governor wanted to support his Cover All Pennsylvanians program, and not in support of how that program got developed in what the House did a couple of weeks ago in something called Access for Basic Care, Pennsylvania ABC.
Okay.
Both programs attempted to, of that 800, 900,000 people who are uninsured, cover another 200 to 250,000 over the next 5 years. It's a worthy goal.
Okay, we're going to go to a break, but the bottom line is cover the 800,000 people. Don't use this M-Care fund. It's set up for another purpose. Look for another way to pay for it.
Exactly.
That's the bottom line.
Exactly.
All right, we're going to continue with our health care discussion with Carolyn Scanlan after these messages.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Penn Future, where we believe that every environmental victory grows the economy, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. As you know, for about a year or so, we've been doing these monthly healthcare updates. You know, healthcare has now become one of the most important issues in the presidential campaign. It's a huge issue, and we're getting into important pieces of it, I think, that all of our viewers should have some interest in. Cover all these uninsured folks, what to do about the rising health care rates that people pay. And the legislature, Carolyn, has been sort of trying to deal with that, this notion that if you've got a particular problem, or you could have a health problem going into buying coverage, or you could be a little older, or you could be differences in gender in terms of the kind of health care that you might need, that it might affect the rate of the insurance that you pay. It's complicated, but this is pretty important. Why is it important?
It's very important. I mean, when we talk about the uninsured, it's because people can't get insurance either individually or their employers no longer offer it to them in their place of employment. And we've seen a drop in employers offering health insurance to their employees, mostly in the small business category, 50 employees or less, because of the cost of the premium to both the employer and the employee. And so this bill is the start of an attempt to try to control those premium costs for small employers. The way it's developed says that you can't develop the premium based purely on the experience of that group, those people that the employer has. Because if you have a bad experience, your premium shoots up. And so it's to sort of even out how the insurance pool looks like and then how the premiums are set.
Is this sort of one of the problems that, I mean, look, you're a policy expert in addition to what you do, every day. Is this kind of what universal coverage would overcome? Go ahead.
In large part. If you think about the Medicare program, which is a program for people over 65, it pays and sets the premium for the individual Medicare beneficiary regardless of whether they're sick or not. It's even. It's a large pool of people. It evens out the sort of the risk of that pool.
So the point is, if you have a small group and you've got a bunch of folks with more severe medical problems, it rises the cost. But if you make
it bigger and bigger, it spreads that risk, that insurance risk, over larger groups of people.
And there's no concern that that will sort of reduce the quality of the insurance per se, that there may be limits or more.
Well, we're seeing that anyway. In order to try to control the cost of the premium, we have these new products that have pretty large deductibles, $2,000, $3,000, or larger co-pays in order to reduce down the premium, because each time you do that, it means that the insurer's payment for the care is less, and therefore their risk is less. So it's a matter of trying to come up with multiple ways of helping people buy insurance at a reasonable and affordable rate.
Yeah, we have about less than a minute, but I just want to return to this coverage. We talked a little bit about it at the break, the coverage for the uninsured. I mean, it looks like this is going to happen in some form, some way, or are you not as optimistic about it?
Well, this is going to be difficult because of the financing of it in this state, in a state program. We know that we're into an economic downturn, and the Fed chairman called it a recession yesterday. That will affect the state revenues, and so the state's going to have to come up with some of the financing in order to do this. And I think we're going to have in both houses some fiscal conservatives who are going to be very concerned about starting a new program in an economic downturn.
And they already are. Thanks, as always. Thanks for coming in. Great update. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.